Hey everyone, we're going to get started in just a minute here. We're going to let everyone kind of trickle in over the next minute or two. While we're waiting on all the attendees to get in, I'm going to launch kind of an intro poll, if everyone wouldn't mind taking a second or two to answer it. Alrighty. I think we're going to have everyone that's going to be joining us today. So welcome everybody. We'll go ahead and get started. So the topic of today's webinar is transforming project reviews to a data-driven approach. So I'm happy to be joined today with Nichole Carter. Nichole, if you want to give a quick introduction of yourself.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thanks for letting me join you guys. I am a business owner and a construction technology consultant full-time. I work with clients to make sure that they optimize or maximize their return on their investment when launching any kind of construction technology, whether that's an ERP, an ops platform, Salesforce, what have you. So yeah, thanks again for letting me join in.
Yeah, and then I'm Kevin Bright. I'm the product manager with ProNovos. So ProNovos is a financial intelligence platform. We really try and help contractors take their financial data and really leverage it to make better insights, better decisions. Yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. So what we plan on covering today is, one, what's the importance of project reviews? Why do you want to be doing them? And then also, what are some of the challenges that come with the current processes to do that? And we're going to look at some examples, how others do them, and what might be some of the pitfalls there. And then we're going to take a look at, what's maybe a way that we can be looking to do project reviews in the future. What's a way that we can streamline it and really transform to it? And then if we have time at the end, what I'm actually going to do is I'll give a quick kind of 5-minute demo of what we've come up with at ProNovos in terms of how we can streamline that project review process, and then we'll finish with any Q&A at the end. So I guess real quick, if you do have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A chat, and I'll make sure that we circle back to them at the end of the webinar. But I guess the place to start is, Nichole, I'm curious from your perspective and your experience in the industry, why do you feel project reviews are an important process?
Yeah, I think as you kind of see in the slide, we've identified a couple of different things, but I mean, overall, just oversight and management of a project, there is a whole lot of importance of being able to have, true cost conditions, make sure that you're up to date on everything, make sure that you're meeting schedule milestones. And realistically, I think that for the most part, we all try to really work to, the schedule or to the budget from day one. But unfortunately, things get in the way, changes happen, change orders happen. And that process becomes kind of a secondary side note to just getting work put in place today. So I think being able to take a step back and really, look at your current conditions of the project and make sure that forecasts are good to go, make sure that everything is on track. And, I was just reading a survey the other day from the top 400 contractors that said that over 50% of our domestic projects are over budget and past the schedule date of completion. And I think that that really speaks to the problem in our industry overall, that if we aren't managing from day one through the entirety of the project, it's really hard to course correct and get back on track. Also, I think that the oversight aspect of having corporate insight and having executives be able to lend a hand and help with course correction or provide additional options or resources to teams. We can't really know their needs unless we're actually sitting down and looking at these, data points on a regular basis to make sure that we are on track. So I think just overall making sure that we are, pathing forward correctly, but also being able to take a step back and make sure that everything is good to go. So we don't have to make modifications, I think is always a benefit to us. And doing that on a regular cadence, I think is ideal.
Yeah, and I think what you mentioned about the course correction is really the big thing, right? And I'm curious from your perspective, Nichole, but what I realized when I was in the construction industry, a lot of times when things went wrong on projects, it was very rarely because like somebody screwed up or somebody didn't know what they were doing or made a mistake. I mean, certainly there's examples of that, but that's kind of more of the extreme. Usually what happened is somebody just didn't catch something in time, right? It was an issue that could have been corrected, but we all had 1,000 things going on. We missed it. And by the time we recognized it, it snowballed and now it was a giant issue where if we were doing that kind of proactive, hey, let's review everything, let's make sure we understand, we could have caught it early on. And yes, there may have still been, some overruns because of it, but we could have really headed it off and really mitigated what the impact of those would have been.
Absolutely, 100%.
So moving on here, I'm kind of curious, what do you see some of the common challenges in terms of doing a thorough project review process in today's environment?
Yeah, I mean, I work with a lot of different clients, and a lot of them are kind of heading off the major issues, and most of them have to do with the fact that they've chosen, best-in-class solutions, whether it's the ERP or an ops platform or, all of the scheduling, the estimating platforms. But really isolating our data into one system has become kind of a huge challenge for folks. I also think that a lot of folks want the flexibility of something like a spreadsheet would offer, right? Of being able to analyze data points, but really being able to provide conditions or, make easy changes to be able to see an outcome that they're anticipating. Whereas realistically, I think having true cost in, an actual mainframe database that actually is sourcing information that is realistic and live, I think is to everyone's benefit. But those data silos really have become a huge hindrance of being able to do the project, reporting easily. I think is a big thing. A lot of people are currently doing it, but they're sourcing it from 10 different systems, and being able to do that it takes forever to do, like, hours upon hours. And a lot of the projects out here, PMs that are managing 3 small commercial jobs, and the end of the month reporting can take 2 days out of their month schedule. And that's 2 days away from all of the other things that they're supposed to be doing and managing. So being able to streamline this process is, ideal scenario. But right now I see the big thing is the fact that all of our data is scattered amongst all these different systems. So, if you want to go to the next slide, this is actually a client I'm currently working with. The first thing that we do is sit down and actually talk about where all of our data lives and what is actually embedded in all of these different systems. And this is not abnormal at all. Not only are all of these companies paying for every one of these solutions, but they're also isolating their information to be able to have valuable insights on a project level, but also on a corporate level. So being able to do that, I think a lot of folks are still resulting or ending back up in our favorite system, and that's Excel, unfortunately. But again, they're taking data points from one system, re-entering it into Excel, and then creating dashboards based off of all of the different insights that they want to build, whether that's a KPI basis or, corporate reporting or project-based reporting. And again, there's a whole lot can go wrong with that because you're doing duplicate entry, triplicate entry potentially, having to source it. And there's user error that could potentially happen as well. But the big thing here is that a lot of people are relying upon manual entry of these items from all these different systems. But I can't emphasize enough that Bart, my friend from The Simpsons, definitely had the best little meme here ever, because Excel is not a database. And I have a hard time not telling that to a lot of really huge companies, but also some small companies that are just trying to tap into some of their financial reporting on a little bit better basis. Because I think it's easy for us to revert back to what we're comfortable with. But this also creates a lot of havoc because it takes forever to build out these systems and are these spreadsheets that have 15 different tabs that are sourcing data, from 5 different solutions. But I can't emphasize enough that like Excel should not be our option, or I would encourage crews to stop relying so heavily upon Excel. I have another client that is really focused on utilizing a stand and deliver method where they're doing a monthly PowerPoint presentation with all of their different data point insights for project management. And if you go to the next slide, you can kind of see some of that, actually, I totally skipped ahead. This is actually a big thing. This is the resulting factor of us building out these insane Excel spreadsheets with 20 different tabs. I have a lot of companies that are relying on that, and it works for them, but the reality is that it's pretty and not smart, right? I can build visualizations off of information that is sitting in Excel file or even being pulled into a BI system, but the reality is a lot can go wrong. You've got formulas that can get, misentered. You can have information get misentered, and there's no connectivity to like why these items are going one way or the other, right? There's no connectivity to be able to tap in and say, well, hold on, we had a change order that was, 40K more than it should have been. There's no connectivity because this information is simply living in an Excel spreadsheet, and it literally is being hand entered on a monthly basis. So when I say pretty and not smart, that's what these are all built off of. And we spent hours toiling over the construction of all of these. And realistically, there's just not a whole lot of insight to be gathered from them. And it's a moment in time. There's no over under. I'm not seeing projections here. I'm not seeing any, potential like forecasting mentions here. It literally is data entry for data entry's sake, and visualizations have been created from them. So that's why I want people to really encourage them to move away from this Excel option. The next slide is the one that is more geared towards, a stand and deliver process where this is actually an activity they're doing on a monthly basis, and it's almost like a firing line. A lot of PMs really kind of shut down when they're standing in front of a group of executives and they're having to explain these data points that, again, are a moment in time. But realistically, they're trying hard to leverage the insight from all of the experience sitting in the room. But a lot of time, you don't really have a whole lot of connectivity to the information that's being presented in these, meetings. Because again, it's not something that you're able to actually tangibly follow or see, and what the resulting conditions are of all of these entry points. So even though they're having good conversations in these sessions, it really is not that beneficial to the group as a whole. And there's zero corporate reporting coming out of either of these options, whether we're doing a project reporting into a beautiful Excel spreadsheet that results in a visualization, or having a meeting like this, you don't really see a whole lot of benefit off of that project's little island. It's all isolated. It's just information living on that job. Whereas if we could tap into this information on a project level and on a corporate level, these insights would be much more valuable.
Yeah, and I want to double back to what you said about Excel, because I think that's really a key point. And this is something we see a lot. We work with a lot of contractors that when they come to us, they say, hey, I really want to be more data focused in our company. I really want to be more data analytically inclined. And the instinctual response for almost all of them is like, well, I'm going to produce 1,000 different spreadsheets. And that's great, that you're taking the time to kind of dive into the data, but it's not really a scalable or manageable process because of those silos you described, right? For each Excel sheet you have, that data is living only in that Excel sheet. It's not talking to any other Excel sheet. You oftentimes, the only person that understands that Excel sheet is the person who created it, and you need the magic decoder ring to understand what's going on in it. So yes, Excel has its place in the industry. It's not going to go away. It's a really powerful, flexible tool. But if you're using Excel for the majority of your analysis of your project data, there's going to be real limitations to it because it is just existing in that silo. And I think you see that when you get to a lot of these kind of like stand and deliver meetings, like you talked about, because that information is so siloed and there's so many different ways and avenues that you can take that information, it can almost kind of feel like you're on like the witness stand, right? You know, what's my executive team going to ask me? It can be a real stress-inducing process. You got to feel like you know all the ins and outs of everything, and it could go in 1,000 different directions. Where if you have a more standardized process where it's not existing in different silos, that you are able to draw these connections across the projects and be like, here are the 5 or 6 things that I know I need to answer to every time we go into one of these meetings. It's going to really relieve a lot of that tension between the project team and the executive team and make everyone feel a little bit better that they're discussing what's most important on the projects.
Yeah, I think we all are equipped to handle hard discussions because not all projects go the way we want them to. But being able to have that discussion and be able to be reactive and be able to actually make process changes or make adjustments with resource management or with numbers, whatever needs to happen. I think we're all equipped to do that. I think it's just if the process is a little bit easier and you have that insight at your fingertip at any point in the month instead of it always being, you know, at the end of the month kind of scenario, I think there's some benefit here of actually being really proactive and making changes intermittently as well, which I think is to everyone's benefit.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point too, is really what you want to do is you want to streamline, you know, the amount of time it takes to kind of gather the data, analyze the data, or I shouldn't say analyze, gather the data and really make sense of the data. Because if you're spending 90% of your time just trying to get all the numbers to make sense and get it all into one sheet, you're not spending any time actually analyzing it and understanding your project. And I think that's where you see a lot of contractors get more of that retroactive approach rather than being proactive. Of course, you need to understand what's happened prior on the project. It's really good to spend time in these project review meetings to talk about what's happened so far on the project. But it should really be more focused on, hey, where's this project going? Where's it's going to end up? What are the challenges that are still facing it? And if you're spending so much time focusing on just understanding and getting the data of what's happened to date, then you're really not being able to leverage that kind of conversation about, okay, what's coming down the pipeline? What do we need to discuss? What do we need to be ready for?
Exactly.
Okay, and I think this is where ProNovos can really start to help certain contractors. So what we do at ProNovos is basically we try and help mitigate the amount of time that you're having to do that data prep, right? Pulling the data, getting different reports, getting it all into one Excel sheet. So what we're going to do is we're going to connect directly to some of your data sources. Typically, we almost always start with your accounting system or your ERP system. That's going to be your best data source with the most accurate data. And then we're going to pull it into our database and use our data model to basically create some standard data sets of what we know you're going to be looking for. So things like your budgets, your job costs, what's your AP, what's your AR on the project. And that really cuts down on the amount of time that you need to spend kind of prepping the data, right? That's kind of our view is, you know, if you're working for a contractor, you know, chances are you're not a data scientist by training, right? You're a construction expert. And yes, we want you to be well versed in the data, but the less time that we can spend you putting on your data scientist hat, and the more time that we can spend at letting you be that construction expert, where you're just analyzing the data, intaking it to make better decisions and better insights on the project, really the better off you're going to be. And then the other thing that allows us to do is as we pull all of that data into one system, what we can start to do is look for some of those trend and analysis across your organization. So this gets back to like what Nichole was talking, right? You want to avoid those silos where everything kind of exists in just the one Excel sheet. So if you're using a tool like ProNovos, where you're able to aggregate the data and kind of understand what's happening across all your projects, you can start to identify certain trends and patterns and look for areas of improvement. So for example, one tool that we have in our platform is when you're updating your project forecast for your project review, you can go through and select a root cause behind that adjustment. So, you know, did you run over budget because there was a scope gap? Was there a design oversight? What might it have been? And if you can start making these adjustments on all your projects, it becomes a really good way to understand, okay, is there somewhere in our processes that we need to improve? Let's say time and time again, we're having cost overruns because there's missing information, right? The guys on the site didn't know what they had to do, so they were standing around waiting for information. Well, that means we might want to take a look at our RFI process. Maybe we're not getting drawing updates out to the field in a timely manner. So it's a really good way to kind of say, okay, not only what's happening on one project that led to cost overruns, but what's kind of happening across the board. And can we create this feedback loop and feedback system so we can get better and better on each successive project?
Yeah, and I see this as a benefit of being able to tap into corporate insights as well, right? If we're seeing scope gap on 4 different projects during our monthly review, I'm going to make sure that I'm talking with the head estimator, that we are analyzing these specific items and making sure that any new estimate going forward has that stuff covered completely. So I see this is insanely beneficial to be able to see this in one, breakdown area, but also being able to look at it from, not only on one project, but on 10 projects. Or your commercial jobs, your residential jobs, the different segments. This is really powerful insight right here.
Yeah, I think the corporate reportings are a really good one to hit on, Nichole, because I think it does something that I think a lot of, quite frankly, the whole industry, I think, struggles on sometimes, is there's so much institutional knowledge in the industry, right? There's a ton of experience, there's a ton of know-how, a ton of instinct, guys who have been doing it for decades and decades. They know what they need to do when they look at a project, and they have all that knowledge up in their head. So when they look at a project, they know how to start analyzing what they're looking for. And that's really good, but that becomes really hard when you're bringing in new project engineers, new project managers. They have no way to tap into that really hard-earned experience and knowledge from the people that came before them. So having tools like this where you can kind of take that knowledge and embed it into corporate reporting, it really helps you take that institutional knowledge and make it more accessible, not for the people that already have it, but for the people that can really benefit and learn from some of those lessons from the people that came before them.
Yeah, trust but verify, right? Trust your gut,
Yep.
but verify it with the data.
Yep.
I definitely think that that's something we all in construction can relate to.
Yeah. So I know we've only got a few minutes left here, so I'm going to pull up ProNovos real quick just to give everyone a quick flavor of what the platform looks like. I'm certainly not going to have time to go through the whole project review. At the end of the webinar here, if you would like to see more of it, there's a link that you can sign up for a demo request where we can kind of show you all the ins and outs of the project review. But what I'm going to hit on here is just it at a high level. So if you kind of select the project review in ProNovos, what you're going to see is there's going to be these 5 different options of financials, project forecast, change orders, billings, and schedule. And what this is going to allow you to do is basically enter in the information for each of these. So rather than you having to manually input things, we're going to pull all this data so it's pre-populated for you. So then you're just analyzing it and providing context. And I think this is a really important part of the project review process. It's not only about the numbers, but it's about the context around it. So for example, if you're reviewing your change orders and you're looking at how your contract and budget and profit change from the original to the revised, you're not only kind of reviewing to say, yep, these numbers make sense, this is what's happening. You can add any comments or notes to add further context. So if you want to add any comments, notes here, then you would have the ability to do that. You can look at kind of what your change order status is. So you can see what your approved change orders are still out there, your estimate change orders, any new change orders since the last project. It really gives you that opportunity to go through and really provide any details around that information. And as you complete each of these sections, you can kind of mark it reviewed. And as you've completed each section, you can go on to the next one. So now we're on to billings. You can see what your billed amount in March is, what your total billed amount is, what your earned revenue is. Again, the ability to add comments and notes. Over here, it's got over billings and under billings where you have to provide an explanation of what why you're overbilled or underbilled. That's something we hear time and time again from contractors and specifically CFOs when they're going out to external stakeholders. The thing that they get asked often is, why are you overbilled? Why are you underbilled? It can be a real bellwether of how a project is performing. And equally important to just the number is the reason behind it. So again, it's providing that data, but the context behind it. And again, all the data is getting populated here in ProNovos. So you're not having to spend time to collect it and manually input it. It's there. So you can really spend the time focusing on it where you're saying, okay, I know how much I'm overbilled. I can now spend my time providing the explanation for why I'm overbilled or why I'm underbilled. So as you go through and complete each of these sections, once you've completed it, you can submit that project review, and that's going to basically save it in the database. So, as you complete your March project review, when you get to April and you want to see, okay, what was going on in this project in March, you can pull up that March project review and see all your notes, all your comments, what was the overbilling then compared to the overbilling now? What was my profit margin then compared to my profit margin now? So you can kind of keep that history of how did a project develop from 1 month to the next, so you can kind of really understand the full picture of it.
Yeah, I love the color coding here as well. I mean, like the simple things that really allow you to really see insight without having to dive really deep. Like the fact that you've got, an invoice that hasn't, or there was an invoice, almost 80 days ago, it's still outstanding and unpaid, and being able to kind of see that really quickly and clearly, I think is pretty phenomenal.
Yeah. And that's really what we want to is we want to make everything kind of all the data that's important in your project. Let's bring it to the surface, make it as transparent as possible. So again, we can focus on analyzing it and really get a good understanding of what's happening in these projects. So when you go into the project review, it doesn't feel like you're on the witness stand, right? You know what the executive team is going to want to hear from you. You're ready. You've already reviewed all the data, and you can kind of have that very focused discussion about here are the most important things on the project, and then it can be kind of more forward-looking instead of retroactive for you.
So kind of, we've got a question in the Q&A that says, how often does the data in ProNovos review update? This happens like it's every day, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So basically what we do is we're going to update the data nightly. So as you kind of make your updates in your accounting system on a Wednesday, when you log into ProNovos on a Thursday, the data is going to be updated effectively. That's something we're actually working on now and we're super excited about is what we're calling our on-demand sync functionality, where we would still do that automatic nightly load. But then let's say you posted payroll at 2 p.m. and you needed to refresh the data, you'd be able to kind of hit that on-demand sync button and it would reload the data in about 15, 20 minutes. So that's not something we've released yet. We plan to release it in Q2, but we're super excited about that as well. Yeah.
True condition, right? I mean, like that's insane. Being able to have that insight and be able to jump in at any time you would want. Again, it doesn't have to be at the end of the month, right? It could be, a weekly basis of you jumping in and actually seeing some information, because it's streamlined right here. Another question was the most requested data matrix for PM for review. I think that this kind of speaks to, the segments that you guys have broken these down, the 5 different segments, and that you've only have those like 4 or 5 different questions in each of the segments. I would almost say that they really do fall in line with most companies' KPI analysis or like the data metrics that people are asking for review. Because each section really goes through all of the different topics. Can we look at another section?
Yeah, so why don't we go to, let's go to the project forecast. So this would show you kind of what your forecasted final costs are, your job costs, cost to complete. You can see a breakdown summary view of all of your cost classes, what your initial budget is versus your job costs, what are still your outstanding commitments, your projected final cost to complete. You can see any job costs since your last project review and any forecast adjustments. So like you were saying, probably the 5 sections that we think are most important for every project manager to have going in project reviews, your top level financials, right? What's the profit margin on the job? What's the contract amount? What's my current budget? Then it's going to be this project forecast. All right. What's going to be my projected final cost on the project? This is going to be one of the most important things. Obviously, it's going to drive your revenue calculations on the project. And it's really important just from a practical standpoint to know, like, hey, are we going to finish over budget or under budget? Then the 3rd section, change orders, right? All right. So the project forecast, that's going to be changing my internal budget. Change orders, that's going to be changing my external budget, right? What's the extra work I'm getting paid for? It's really important to understand how is your scope changing on the project. and what are those change orders that have been approved versus what are the ones that are still pending. Then we go to billings, all right? Yes, we know the project forecast drives the revenue, but then there's the other side of the coin. What are my billings on the project? And probably the most important metric on the billings is what is my over under billings? And then the last section is schedule. We take a little bit of a different approach on schedule. We view it more from, hey, do you have enough labor budget to basically meet your schedule? So those are the 5 big budgets: financials, project forecast, change orders, billings, and schedule, that we think if you have a really good handle on, you're probably well on your way to having a really thorough project review process.
Awesome. The last question was, how do you input content into the root cause fields? That's in the change order options, right? Those are upon changes. You're going to associate your root cause item with it, correct?
Yeah, so when you do your project forecast and you're going in and making your adjustments at the cost code or cost class level, so like let's say you've got a cost code for concrete deck, and you have to increase the labor by $5,000 because it took you 1 extra day to input it. When you go make that adjustment and say, all right, this is going to be $5,000 more than I thought, that's where you have the ability to select the root cause. And one thing that I like to emphasize when we do that root cause adjustment is we don't only prompt you for a root cause when you have a cost overrun. We also prompt you for that root cause when you have a cost saving, because we think that's equally important. If you did something right on this, well, let's make sure we capture that, so when we get to the next project, we can have those same improvements as well. So if you'd like to see kind of a more thorough breakdown of what that root cause analysis looks like, I would definitely encourage you to sign up for a demo of ProNovos. And I know we're coming up on time here, so unless there's any more questions, I'll close with that. If you would like to see a demo of ProNovos, we'd be more than happy to go, show one. There's a link right here where you can request a demo. But yeah, other than that, I don't think we have any other questions. So Nichole, if you've got any kind of final closing thoughts or things you wanted to close with, I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, it's just you're only as good as the information in front of you, right? And you can only react and be proactive based off that. And I think that's why I'm impressed with the tool, is that it streamlines this process amazingly for PMs and for executive teams. So thanks for letting me join you today and highlight something I'm so passionate about.
Yeah, we certainly appreciate having you on the call today, Nichole.
Thanks.
All right. Well, unless there's any last questions, we'll bring the webinar to a close. I thank everyone for joining today, and I hope you got something out of it, and we will see you all in the future. Thank you.